Did you know Michigan sits at the center of a system holding about 21% of all the world's surface fresh water? And there's a 70-year-old oil pipeline running beneath the Straits of Mackinac right now that is still the subject of active legal proceedings? Did you know beneath Detroit there are over 100 miles of salt mine tunnels and sinkholes linked to Michigan's limestone geology, still open across the lower peninsula without warning? Did you know the Flint water crisis didn't end in Flint? You think Michigan is Ford trucks, frozen lakes, and the Lions losing. What it actually is, geologically, ecologically, and historically, is one of the strangest, most unhinged, completely true stories in America. And fact number one is going to change how you see the water everyone assumes will always be there. Michigan looks like an ordinary Midwestern state on the map. Beneath the mitten shape is one of the most geologically complex, ecologically improbable, and structurally precarious landscapes in North America. And most of its residents have no idea. Fact number 22. Michigan is the only state that touches 4 of the 5 Great Lakes. You picture Michigan as a mitten surrounded by fresh water, and that image still understates it. Michigan's 3,288 miles of freshwater coastline exceed every other U.S. state and rival the Atlantic seaboard. And the catch is haunting. That boundary is not fixed. Great Lakes water levels swung from record lows to record highs within a single decade. The shoreline Michigan built its identity around is actively, measurably moving, and the state has no plan matching the scale of the system it sits at the center of. Fact number 21. Michigan was carved by ice, and the scars are still opening. You think of Michigan's terrain as ordinary flat Midwestern farmland. Glaciers up to a mile thick shaped the entire state just 10,000 years ago, leaving the Great Lakes, 11,000 inland lakes, and soils that shift dramatically within miles. But here's the reality check. In areas underlain by soluble limestone bedrock, that same geological legacy contributes to sinkholes that still open without warning in parts of the lower peninsula today. In neighborhoods, under roads, on lawns, with new incidents documented every year. Fact number 20. The Upper Peninsula is geologically a different world. You think of Michigan as one coherent state. The Upper Peninsula sits on Precambrian bedrock over 1 billion years old, some of North America's oldest exposed rock, while the Lower Peninsula rests on relatively young sedimentary limestone and sandstone. They are fundamentally different geological systems joined by a bridge. But here's the reality check. The UP's ancient copper-bearing rock fueled America's first major mining boom, and the extraction scars, millions of tons of legacy mine waste, continue to affect surrounding soils and water along Lake Superior's western shore. Fact number 19. Michigan has an island where cars have been banned for 125 years, with a ticking time bomb underneath. You think Mackinac Island is pure charm. Horse-drawn carriages, Victorian hotels, no cars since 1898. It sits above one of the most sensitive freshwater junctions on Earth, the Straits of Mackinac, where Lake Huron and Lake Michigan exchange water. But here's the reality check. Directly beneath those straits runs Line 5, a 1953 dual pipeline carrying large volumes of crude and gas liquids daily. It is the subject of active legal proceedings over its risk and future, and it is still running right now. Fact number 18. Detroit has over 100 miles of tunnels directly beneath the city. You picture suburban Detroit as ordinary flatland built on solid ground. Directly beneath the city lies one of North America's largest active salt mines, 1,000 feet underground, with over 100 miles of excavated tunnels and roads workers once drove through. But here's the reality check. Michigan's broader subsurface includes areas of soluble rock where dissolution can contribute to ground instability. Across parts of the Lower Peninsula, sinkholes linked to these geological conditions continue to form, in communities that often have no warning before the ground moves. Michigan sits at the center of the largest freshwater system on Earth. What is happening to that water, right now, in real time, is the strangest environmental story in America. Fact number 17. The Great Lakes hold 21% of Earth's surface fresh water, and no single authority is managing them. You assume the Great Lakes are inexhaustible. Michigan sits at the center of the largest surface freshwater system on Earth, 21% of the global total. Yet water levels in Lakes Michigan and Huron dropped to near-record lows in 2013, exposing miles of lakebed and collapsing coastal economies, then swung to near-record highs in 2020, flooding hundreds of properties. But here's the reality check. That swing was not just normal variation. It reflects variability increasingly influenced by changing climate patterns. And Michigan has no unified, large-scale plan to actively manage the resource it calls its greatest asset. Fact number 16. The Flint water crisis didn't end in Flint. You think the Flint lead contamination was a local failure that has since been addressed? It was a failure. But the geography of that failure matters. If Flint sits on a corrosive river, in a city whose industrial collapse had eliminated the tax base needed to maintain aging infrastructure. But here's the reality check. Michigan still has hundreds of thousands of lead service lines delivering water to homes across Detroit, Benton Harbor, and dozens of smaller cities right now. The pipes that failed Flint are the same pipes still in the ground across the state. The crisis didn't end. It widened. Fact number 15. Michigan's water is being contaminated by chemicals that will never break down. You think PFAS, forever chemicals, are a diffuse national problem. Michigan is one of America's most heavily PFAS-impacted states, partly because it was home to industrial facilities that used and discharged PFAS compounds for decades. But here's the reality check. Contamination has been confirmed at hundreds of Michigan sites: municipal water supplies, military bases, private wells. And because PFAS compounds can persist for generations in the environment, what is already in Michigan's groundwater will remain a contamination challenge for decades to come. No cleanup timeline changes the scale of that persistence. Fact number 14. Over 180 non-native species have already invaded the Great Lakes, and the door is still open. You picture the Great Lakes as a pristine natural system. Since the St. Lawrence Seaway opened in 1959, more than 180 non-native species have entered the lakes in ship ballast water. Zebra mussels, sea lamprey, round gobies, permanently reshaping food webs and shoreline ecosystems. But here's the reality check. Asian carp have been detected in waterways connected to Lake Michigan, and preventing their entry into the lakes remains an active engineering and policy challenge right now. A breach would threaten a fishery worth billions annually. The threat is ongoing. Fact number 13. Lake Erie was declared dead, cleaned up, and is being re-poisoned by the same source. You think Lake Erie's environmental crisis is a solved chapter in American history. The Cuyahoga River, feeding Erie, caught fire from pollution in 1969, prompting the Clean Water Act. The lake recovered. But here's the reality check. Agricultural phosphorus runoff has returned Lake Erie's western basin to annual toxic algae blooms severe enough to shut down Toledo's municipal drinking water and create oxygen-depleted dead zones where fish cannot survive. The lake was cleaned up by regulating industry. It is being re-poisoned by agriculture. The same political will required to fix it the first time has not materialized a second time. Fact number 12. Michigan's forests were completely stripped in 50 years, and the ghost towns are still there. You picture Michigan's northern forests as an enduring natural feature. In 1850, Michigan had 19 million acres of old-growth pine and hardwood. By 1900, virtually all of it had been clear-cut in one of the fastest logging operations in North American history. Settlers who followed were promised fertile farmland, but the sandy glacial soils under those forests couldn't support agriculture. Thousands of farms were abandoned within a generation. But here's the reality check. The ghost towns from that 50-year mistake are still scattered across the northern Lower Peninsula. Entire counties that peaked, collapsed, and never recovered. Michigan gave America the automobile, the assembly line, the modern middle class, and Motown. Then it watched all of them leave. The human geography of Michigan is a normal to nightmare story that the rest of America is still pretending was inevitable. Fact number 11. Detroit invented the middle class, then became the blueprint for its collapse. You know Detroit as a symbol of industrial decline. In 1950, it was among the wealthiest per capita manufacturing cities on Earth. Ford's $5 day had helped build the modern industrial middle class and created the concept that workers should be able to afford what they build. and Detroit turned that idea into a civilization. But here's the reality check. Detroit's 2013 municipal bankruptcy, one of the largest in U.S. history at approximately $18 billion, wasn't an accident or a natural disaster. It was the accumulated result of corporate decisions made over decades to automate, suburbanize production, and offshore work. The city built the middle class. The middle class left the city. Fact number 10. Michigan lost more manufacturing jobs in a decade than most states have in total. You think of Michigan's auto industry decline as a gradual, managed transition. Between 2000 and 2010, Michigan shed over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, among the steepest losses of any U.S. state in that period. The communities built entirely around single plants in Flint, Saginaw, and Lansing didn't diversify. They collapsed. But here's the reality check. The auto industry itself survived and recovered. The towns built to serve it didn't. Michigan's industrial geography created a direct link between corporate decisions made in boardrooms and the physical death of specific communities. A link that economic recovery statistics consistently obscure. Fact number 9. Michigan's two peninsulas were separate worlds until 1957. You take for granted that Michigan's two peninsulas are connected. For most of the state's history, they weren't. The Straits of Mackinac, with powerful and unpredictable currents, were considered an enormous engineering challenge for decades. The Mackinac Bridge, completed in 1957, is one of the longest suspension spans in the world. But here's the reality check. Without it, the Upper Peninsula, geologically distinct, culturally different, economically isolated, would almost certainly have drifted into Wisconsin's orbit. The bridge didn't just connect two landmasses, it held Michigan together as a functioning state. Fact number 8. The city that sold America the car made sure its own people had no alternative. You assume Detroit, the city that built the automobile industry, at least has functional transportation infrastructure. The broader Detroit metro area, more than 4 million people, has almost no regional rail, no meaningful light rail network, and a single 0.9-mile streetcar line serving a tourist corridor downtown. But here's the reality check. Historical evidence suggests the auto industry influenced and resisted transit investment for decades. Transit-dependent residents were less likely to buy cars, and the political and financial weight of the industry shaped infrastructure decisions accordingly. The city that created America's car culture engineered its own population into car dependency, and then watched those same people leave when they could no longer afford to stay. Fact number 7. 73 people, most of them children, died at a Christmas party during a labor strike. You think of Michigan's labor history as marches and union halls. On Christmas Eve 1913, during a copper miners' strike in Calumet, someone called out, "Fire!" in a crowded union hall where workers' families had gathered for a children's party. 73 people were killed in the stampede, the majority children. No fire existed. The Italian hall disaster ended the strike and broke the union. And the catch is haunting. The person who made the call was never identified, no meaningful prosecution followed, and the hall was later demolished. The community never rebuilt. The injustice was simply absorbed. Fact number 6. Motown was born in Detroit and left before the smoke cleared. You know Motown as one of the great American cultural inventions. Berry Gordy's $800 loan that built a record label defining a decade of American music. What the postcard leaves out, Hitsville, USA opened in 1959 in a city where racial segregation, redlining, and economic displacement were building toward the 1967 civil unrest. 43 people killed, 2,000 buildings burned, and the National Guard deployed for 5 days. But here's the reality check. Motown relocated to Los Angeles in 1972. The music that announced Detroit's greatness to the world was already leaving as the city's population collapse accelerated. The soundtrack outlasted the city that made it. Fact number 5. Michigan gets 15 tornadoes a year, and most residents don't take it seriously. You picture Michigan as safely removed from tornado country. Michigan averages around 15 tornadoes per year, and the 1896 outbreak through the Thumb region, the flat peninsula jutting into Lake Huron, killed over 100 people and erased entire townships. But here's the reality check. The thumb's flat terrain and warm Lake Huron moisture create conditions that generate significant tornado activity. And Michigan's reputation as a safe northern state means preparedness culture is far weaker than in comparable risk zones. The storms don't know the stereotype. Fact number 4. A chemical mix-up in 1973 contaminated nearly every Michigan resident's blood. You assume large-scale agricultural contamination events are identified and contained quickly. In 1973, a Michigan chemical company accidentally mixed a toxic flame retardant called PBB into livestock feed, which was then distributed to farms across the state. By the time the contamination was identified, it had spread through Michigan's food supply: cattle, poultry, eggs, dairy. Livestock were buried in mass graves. But here's the reality check. Surveys found detectable PBB levels in the blood of the vast majority of Michigan residents tested. The responsible parties faced limited legal consequences. The long-term public health effects of that widespread exposure were never fully tracked. Fact number 3. Michigan is losing people, and losing the political power to fix it. You assume Michigan's universities, automotive rebound, and natural resources make it a stable Midwestern anchor. Michigan ranked 8th in U.S. population in 1970. It now ranks 10th, losing a congressional seat after both the 2000 and 2010 censuses. Detroit has lost more than 60% of its peak population. But here's the reality check. Demographic decline is self-reinforcing. Fewer people means reduced federal representation, less infrastructure investment, a shrinking tax base, and fewer working-age residents to sustain services for an aging population. Michigan isn't declining slowly. It faces compounding demographic and economic pressures, and its own political system has yet to build consensus around any strategy to reverse them. Fact number 2. There is a 70-year-old oil pipeline beneath the most important freshwater strait in the world. You picture the Straits of Mackinac as Michigan's scenic northern crown. Deep blue water, pine-covered shores, the bridge rising above it. Running beneath those 270-foot currents is Line 5, a dual pipeline built in 1953 that carries large volumes of crude oil and natural gas liquids daily through one of the most important freshwater junctions in the world. The pipeline is the subject of active legal proceedings over its continued operation and replacement. But here's the reality check. A significant rupture would release oil into a current system exiting into both Lake Michigan and Lake Huron within hours, threatening drinking water for tens of millions of people. It is still operating right now. Fact number 1. The Great Lakes are Michigan's greatest responsibility, not just its greatest asset. Here is the fact that reframes everything you just heard. Michigan touches 4 of the 5 Great Lakes and sits at the center of a system holding approximately 21% of all the surface freshwater on Earth. That number sounds like permanent, inexhaustible abundance. It is not. It is a shared inheritance. And the threats to it are not future risks. They are present conditions. Water levels have swung from near-record lows to near-record highs within a decade. Driven by shifting climate patterns the Great Lakes states are only beginning to account for. The Line 5 pipeline runs beneath the Straits of Mackinac right now. Aged beyond its original design expectations, still operating while legal proceedings continue, one significant failure away from releasing oil into both lakes simultaneously. Hundreds of thousands of lead service lines are still in the ground across Michigan cities. PFAS contamination, permanent by chemical nature, has been confirmed at hundreds of sites. More than 180 invasive species have already altered the lake's food webs beyond recovery. None of these are hypothetical. All of them are current. Michigan has never governed itself as if the Great Lakes were a resource requiring active management. It has governed itself as if they were a permanent backdrop, something that defines the state's identity without requiring the state to take responsibility for its protection. The result is a gap between the scale of the resource and the scale of the institutions managing it that grows wider every year. 21% of Earth's surface fresh water. One state at its center. No unified management authority operating at the scale the system demands. No statewide water infrastructure investment plan matching the size of the problem. An aging pipeline still running. Lead still in pipes. Chemicals that will never break down already in the ground. invasive species at the gates of the last unbreached waterways. The Great Lakes are not Michigan's greatest asset. They are Michigan's greatest responsibility, and the distance between those two descriptions is the most important geographical fact in the American Midwest right now. Every fact you just heard, from the sinkholes forming beneath Michigan streets to the 70-year-old pipeline in the Straits, to the forever chemicals already in the groundwater, tells the same story. Michigan is sitting on the most important natural resource on Earth and treating it like an inheritance that doesn't need protecting. The normal version of Michigan is Ford trucks, frozen lakes, and the lions. The nightmare version is underneath all of it, happening right now. And most Michiganders haven't been told. Which fact completely broke your mental model of Michigan? Drop the number in the comments. And if you live in Michigan, do you know what's in your water? Because after making this video, I checked mine. I'm covering the state directly south of Michigan, the one that absorbed the auto jobs Michigan lost, built a different economy around them, and has one geographical secret that makes Michigan's water situation look like a warning Ohio ignored 30 years ago.